Hi there, I'm Batman, and welcome to Saxon's Hydrosphere. What do you mean this is just a cereal box taped to my head? No, it's not. I'm Batman, I'm telling you. I am Batman. I'd like to thank Saxon for letting me guest on his video today. I'm here to tell you to watch my new movie, The Batman.
Thank you for opening the video, Batman. It was an honor to have you on the channel. Let's get into the review.
Whoa! This guy's crazy!
Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome to my review of The Batman. I do hope that you've been able to see it before watching this, because I am going to be diving into a little bit more of the closer details. So if you want to avoid any kind of spoilers, this is a quick, mild spoiler warning for you. But I did think the movie was really good. I don't want to go into too detailed comparisons to the Nolan trilogy or anything, but what I will say is that this is one of the best Batman movies out there and really does come close to the Nolan trilogy in terms of quality. I do have some notes on my phone here that I want to talk about, so if you see me glancing over at my phone, that's why. I've just had a couple of, I need visual cues sometimes. And I do want to start with Robert Pattinson as Batman / Bruce Wayne. I really do respect Robert Pattinson as an actor, because I feel like he's kind of been living in the shadow of his Twilight role. It's kind of followed him around like a bad smell, and people have been reluctant to watch his movies. I think he's a really good actor. He was really good in The Lighthouse a couple of years ago. And also in the Netflix movie, I think it's called The Devil All the Time. He was really good in that as well. I do think he's a really good actor, and he did a really good job playing Batman / Bruce Wayne. I think it's definitely one of the better iterations, and something that's quite different to a lot of other versions of the character. And I've seen quite a few people complain about this actually, that usually there's a big disconnect between the Batman and the Bruce Wayne character. You know how Batman's this brooding character and really dark and mysterious, and Bruce Wayne a lot of the time acts very differently and puts on this facade of a celebrity. But in this movie that's very different. Pattinson plays Bruce Wayne very similarly to how he plays Batman. He's really quiet and reserved and quite brooding, and he's very clearly in a very dark and miserable place in this film, which I really liked. A lot of people didn't. I don't think it would have been right to give Bruce Wayne that rich billionaire celebrity facade that he'll usually carry in different iterations of the character. I think it worked really well here. The supporting cast as well was really good. Most notably Paul Dano. Is it Dano or Dano? I don't know. But anyway, the Riddler is a character that can very easily come across as really corny and cheesy and campy. But in this film, they made him really quite scary. He's a serial killer in this movie, taking the lives of a lot of people with positions of power who aren't really who they seem to be. And when he commits these murders, he's leaving a lot of clues and riddles behind for the police. So it's almost like watching Batman trying to catch the Zodiac killer, which I really enjoyed. This whole movie kind of feels like a detective noir film, which I do think that was the direction that Matt Reeves wanted to take with the film. But Paul Dano was amazing with this role. He had a really threatening and uneasy sense about him, and he steals a lot of the scenes that he's in. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman as well, I thought was really good. She stayed really quite true to the character in some of the things that she says and her mannerisms without making it too campy and over the top. It was really grounded in the tone of the rest of the movie. Another side character I thought was really well done was Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. I really like how they honed in on how James Gordon is very much the middleman between the police and Batman. Most of the police really hate Batman as a vigilante and as an idea in general. And Jim Gordon really has to toe the line between his alliance with Batman and with the rest of the police department. You can really see how much he struggles with it and how difficult of a position that he's put in by bringing Batman along with him into the crime scenes where other police are. There's a real clear conflict there, which Jim Gordon is very much at the center of, and they handle the stress of his character very well. And finally, I want to mention Andy Serkis as Alfred. He wasn't in it too much. He was only in about 3 or 4 key scenes. But what he added to the movie with his little screen time, I really enjoyed. There's a scene with him and Bruce Wayne that I want to talk about a little bit later on, which was one of my favorite character moments within the whole film. I really love what Matt Reeves did with the direction of this film. There's so much of the cinematography that was absolutely stunning. So a couple of complaints that I've heard about the film is the fact that it's nearly 3 hours and it maybe shouldn't be, but I kind of disagree with that. One of the reasons that makes the cinematography so great is that Matt Reeves takes a lot of time to distinguish scenes and distinguish shots. There's a lot of slower moving scenes that really hold a lot of weight and impact to the overall story that would have been lost had the runtime been cut down. And those slower moving scenes that build to something are really what stood out to me a lot in this movie. The opening scene of this movie starts with a point of view shot through some goggles or binoculars or something, watching this family through a window from across the street. It's kind of unclear who this is. At first I thought it might have been Batman watching these people, but it's actually the Riddler watching his next victim. And there's just a good few minutes of this first person point of view shot watching this family, and it really sets the tone and tension in motion for the rest of the movie, which would have been completely lost if you just open it up with the scene of the actual killing taking place. Another one of my favorite scenes that really takes this slow build approach is the first introduction to Batman. We don't see him for a while. We get a long narration from Bruce Wayne about how he's been Batman for 2 years and crime isn't steadying, it's kind of getting worse. He doesn't really know what his place is in Gotham yet. And while the narration is happening, the movie is building up Batman as a threat to the criminals. We see loads of different criminals doing their crimes and everything, and seeing dark alleys and corners of the street hidden in shadows and the bat symbol in the sky. And we really see that Batman as an entity puts so much fear into these criminals. And then coming towards the end of this narration, we see a big group of bad guys about to mug some random dude, who start to hear heavy, slow footprints, and Batman comes out of the shadows and just beats the ever-loving shit out of all of them. They really take the time to set up his presence, so when he walks out, you kind of feel a similar level of fear that the criminals do. And I also think that the cinematography around a lot of the action scenes was really, really well done as well. If there's something that I'm sick of with a lot of superhero movies these days, it's all the quick cut, shaky cam action scenes. But in this movie, there's a lot of wider angles, there are less cuts, and the fights have a lot of weight to them. And on the flip side of all the wider angles, there's a car chase around halfway through the movie that feels so tight and claustrophobic, like you're in the car with them and all this mayhem is going on. A lot of car chases for me run the risk of not really holding much weight and levity to them, but this one is not the case. You feel really on the edge at all times. One of the most tense car chase scenes I think I've ever seen. And then something else that the cinematography and the direction handles really well are just conversational scenes. I mentioned the one before between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. They're in the hospital and Bruce has just had this really harrowing realization that his parents aren't really who he thought they were. And he's having a hard time dealing with what he's found out. But Alfred really brings him back round and there's a really touching conversation between the two of them. Andy Serkis completely stole that scene for me. He was incredibly compelling. Something I really, really liked as well is the atmosphere that was set up for Gotham as a whole, as a city. They did this pretty well in Joker a few years ago, but they really, really amped it up with this one. You can see just how much of a horrible place this is and how it affects everybody living there, from the corruption of people in power and the poverty. There's such a huge class divide and really nothing in the way of justice, and you can see how much of a toll that takes on Bruce Wayne as Batman, on the police, on the poorer people living there. Gotham is an absolute shithole and you can really see how it influences everybody living there. And I mentioned at the start how it opens with a narration from Bruce Wayne, which I thought was a little bit of a strange and risky choice, but it's not something that lasts throughout the entire film, and it's something that's bookended really nicely at the end of the movie. It's not an origin story because we really don't need to see that again. It's more of a coming of age story where Bruce realizes that he's perhaps not been going about this the best way and really realizes what Gotham needs him to be. You know, he starts the film very vengeful and he says, "I'm vengeance." And towards the end of the film, he knows that instead of being vengeance for the bad people, he needs to be a source of hope for all the good people. Overall, I thought it was really, really great. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not sure if I want to do the whole comparison thing to the Nolan trilogy. It's definitely just as good as those, but it's very, very different in terms of its style and what it sets out to do. So I'm not going to go ahead ahead and say which I prefer and which I don't, because they're very different. But what I will say is that if you're a fan of the character, or crime thrillers as a whole, or these kind of stories and this kind of direction and cinematography, the real dark and slow building scenes, then you should definitely go and watch this film. I think I'd say this gets a 9 out of 10 for me. I think it's a really, really great movie. One that I want to see again, hopefully, before it finishes in theatres, and one that I'm definitely going to be picking up once it's released. I hope I've been coherent in my ramblings about this movie. The whole review format is still something that I'm new to and that I'm finding my way in and finding my structure and everything like that. The last one I did, I had a full script set out. This time I've just had notes. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I thank you for taking the time to watch this review and hear my thoughts on the movie. Let me know what you thought of it if you've seen it. I've seen quite a few conflicting opinions of it over the last few days, so I'd love to know what you think of it. Yeah, thanks a lot. Remember to like and subscribe and all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.